So, I rewatched the first Sex and the City movie from 2008, and it was a bit of an odd experience. Usually, I treat this film as a source of light entertainment, fully accepting its over-the-topness and campiness. I sing along to that Click Click Flash song and always get a kick out of Kristen Davis's delivery of the iconic "I cursed the day you were born" line. Plus, I've bonded with so many women over this movie, rewatching it for what it feels like the 20th time, eating unhealthy amounts of chocolate, and having a great time with no thoughts, just vibes. But this time, I decided to view this film through more a critical lens. And while I still enjoyed many parts of it, I discovered that the film's main theme, which is love and labels, is quite questionable.
Well, who's it by? What's the label?
Why'd you move to New York? To fall in love.
And so I couldn't help but wonder, is it really the fashion and romance that drew so many people to the SATC franchise, or was it something else? Something that this movie largely misses? As Peter Travers wrote for Rolling Stone, quote, "Beyond the shoes, the cosmopolitans, and the disloyal men, Sex and the City has always been about the bond among women. At its best, the movie shows why that bond sticks." End quote. Ouch. So in this video, I'll be breaking down the good, the bad, and the fabulous of the first Sex and the City movie. Let's get into it! Let's start with the obvious. This film is heavily focused on Carrie, the majority of the plot revolves around her character, and so the movie opens with her as well. And by the way, am I the only one who always thinks that this girl who passes Carrie on the street is Dakota Johnson? How come it's not her? They literally have the same voice.
I love limes. I love them.
Carrie and Mr. Big are happily in love and are looking for an apartment for them to move in together since they still live separately. They find this enormous penthouse, which Carrie can't afford, but Mr. Big can. And so Carrie and Big decide to get married. They plan an intimate ceremony in a city hall. Everything is meant to be very casual, with no fuss, no diamond rings, just them and closest friends and family. But then their wedding announcement appears in the gossip column of the New York Post. Carrie gets invited to be featured in Vogue. Vivienne Westwood gives Carrie this princessy wedding gown. More on that in a second. And slowly but surely, she completely loses perspective on what she and Big initially wanted, who are they as a couple, what they agreed on, and starts to plan a massive wedding without Big's approval. Carrie spirals and invites more and more people because of the wedding industrial complex, because of Say Yes to the Dress and Marriage or Mortgage. Yes, this show really exists. This is actually my favorite plotline in this film because it serves, unintentionally I presume, as a perfect metaphor for this entire franchise with Carrie's suit as its key symbol. Let me explain. Early on, when Carrie is still on board with a small wedding, she shows Anthony and Charlotte her wedding outfit, a vintage and labelless suit. Again, it ties back to that love and labels theme.
Well, who's it by? What's the label?
No one. I found it in a vintage shop.
But what if I told you, my dear friends, none of it is true? It's a John Galliano for Dior piece from the Dior Resort 2008 collection. This means that when the movie premiered in the late May of 2008, Carrie's suit was in Dior stores and available to purchase. The collection itself I find really beautiful. John Galliano was clearly inspired by the glamour and opulence of the 1960s, and actually Carrie even wears a bright pink magenta coat from this collection later in the movie. Now, I couldn't find any information on whether the representatives of Dior knew that the movie's costume department planned to rip off the tags from their suit and use it as a stand-in for a vintage piece, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't, because get ready for a brewing fashion tea. Not only weren't the Peloton's representatives aware that their bike would be used at a key plot point in the first season of And Just Like That, which, just to remind you, resulted in a massive drop in their shares, but apparently the one and only Dame Vivienne Westwood also didn't know that Carrie wouldn't actually marry Mr. Big. Spoiler! In her custom, one-of-a-kind wedding gown she made specifically for the movie. In his book, Fashion and Film, Christopher Laverty writes that Vivienne Westwood was so outraged that she, quote, left the premiere early with nothing complimentary to say about the film's costume designer, Patricia Field, end quote. Well, at least Miss Piggy got married in a Westwood gown. But why do I think that the suit is a metaphor for this franchise? Well, when Sex and the City first premiered, it was a poorly lit, under-budgeted show that wasn't expected to last more than 2 seasons. And Patricia Field frequently dressed Carrie and the ladies in vintage clothes, partially because of the tight budget and partially to stay authentic to Candace Bushnell's columns, as that's what she and her friends really wore. They used jazz music in the background because it nicely tied to the plot, but also because the licensing was cheap. But then the show took off. So many designer brands started to send their items for ladies to wear, the plot shifted from female liberation to romance, and this show gradually became an international sensation, a cultural phenomenon, if you will. It kept growing, and the creators kept making it bigger and bigger to the point that they lost the show's authenticity, and it's so visible in this film where everything is a bit too well lit now. Instead of jazz music, there are so many pop songs written specifically for the movie, and when they had custom designer clothes made, how could possibly they feature an old tagless piece? You know?
This was a really pretty little Oscar de la Renta that she wore. Oscar made it custom for her.
Next in the movie, we hit a true domino effect. First, Miranda is upset with Steve and says something harsh to Big. He talks to Carrie afterward, which gives her a bad feeling, but she chooses to brush it off. On their wedding day, Big tries to call Carrie, but the true villain of the SATC franchise, a cute and adorable Lily Goldenblatt, hides Carrie's flip phone in her cupcake purse. This results in Big having cold feet and ultimately leaving Carrie at the altar. You guys, why is he alone? Where are the grooms when Big is always alone in this movie? It's so strange. But the scene when Carrie hits him with the flower bouquet, it always delights me. And when Charlotte is like, no, no. I love it. Now, in a 2016 interview, Sarah Jessica Parker said, quote, I used to wonder if Samantha, Charlotte, and Miranda were real, that wasn't just her column, end quote, which sparked a fairly popular fan theory that the ladies don't actually exist, they're just parts of Carrie's psyche, with Miranda representing her head, Charlotte her heart, and Samantha her libido. While I always thought this theory was a bit of a stretch, I can actually see it in this movie. Think about it. The ladies somehow managed to find babysitters, take days off work, and pretty much put their own lives on hold to join Carrie on what would have been her honeymoon. They help her move back into her apartment, which they previously packed, and support her through the crisis. Aww, that scene where Samantha feeds Carrie a yogurt. Aww, the wink. Yet each of the ladies has their own struggles in the movie and no one seems to show up for them. Samantha is lonely in LA, but no one visits her, not even for a weekend. Miranda is trying to find a new place to live after Steve's infidelity, but no one offers her help. Only Magda, but I think she has no choice. Even nobody joins Charlotte on her runs. It almost feels like Carrie is the sun and everyone just orbits around her. So maybe they really don't exist. But then again, we have the iconic New Year's Eve scene. Girl, so confusing. Okay, so let's take a closer look at Miranda's story in this film. Poor Miranda is still living in Brooklyn, plus she's tired and overworked, and she and Steve are going through a dry spell. Between their hectic schedules, raising a child, and dealing with Steve's mother's Alzheimer's, it seems they can't find space for each other. And it's also clear that Miranda takes Steve for granted and neglects their relationship. This eventually leads him to cheat, a one-time mistake he immediately regrets. Oh my god, that belt! The fashion is insane in this movie. But for Miranda, it's one time too many and she decides to separate and move out. They arrange joint custody of Brady, and on New Year's Eve, it's Steve's turn with their son, leaving Miranda to spend the night on her own. So she calls Carrie, as she's the only one in the group spending New Year's Eve alone. Carrie instantly picks up on the sadness in Miranda's voice, and despite Miranda's insisting she's fine and encouraging Carrie to stay home, Carrie decides to go to her anyway. And it's snowing, she can't find a taxi, she's running through New York, determined to reach Miranda on time. It's like a scene straight out of rom-com, but this time it's about friendship, not romance. This is when this movie truly shines, not in the endless fashion montages, although they're fun and delicious because I like fashion, but ultimately they're completely useless. But this movie is at its best in those moments that capture the power of friendship, vulnerability, and loyalty. It's these scenes that remind us why Sex and the City resonated so deeply with us. When it zeroes in on the bond between these women, their support for one another, their willingness to show up in each other's darkest moments, the film transcends the glitz and becomes something far more meaningful. And I wish Charlotte could have had a similarly meaningful moment as well. Her big storyline is that she gets pregnant, which is so amazing, especially after watching her struggle with fertility throughout the series. But this joyous news makes Charlotte afraid to run, even though she says her doctor has given her the go-ahead to continue during pregnancy. Now, the show established Miranda as the runner in the group. She even trained for a marathon with that guy. Wink, wink. So why couldn't Miranda run with Charlotte in the movie? Just to make her feel safe and supported. I think that would have been such a lovely, subtle way to show the strength of their friendship. But instead, we get Charlotte, who's so paranoid about getting Montezuma's revenge in Mexico that she refuses to eat anything except a chocolate pudding made in Poughkeepsie. While it is true that there are places where tap water isn't safe to drink, I don't think we have to joke about it, and this scene plays on stereotypes in a way that feels unnecessary xenophobic. You might argue that the movie was made 16 years ago, so times were different, but I was curious if the creators had ever commented on or expressed any regret about including this scene. After all, they've since acknowledged and apologized for misjudging the tone of the second film, but no. I couldn't find anything at all. Most of the discussion around this movie focuses on the challenges of filming in New York amidst paparazzi and, of course, the fashion. What do you mean you're putting a bird on her head? King asked. Once again, I don't have a legitimate argument, Parker recalls saying, but I'm telling you, this bird is extraordinary. I've got to see the bird. They showed him the bird, secured to Parker's head, while she was in full costume in a Park Avenue building's vestibule on location. She worked that bird like no one's ever worked a bird before, King says. He agreed on the bird, but it was such a bold choice, King felt. He had to put the bird into his script. After the first disastrous wedding attempt, with Big bolting before they could exchange vows, Carrie cries, underlining her dedication to Big. I put a bird on my head, Miranda replies. Is that what it was? I thought it was feathers. This seems like a good moment to discuss Carrie's personal assistant, Louise from St. Louis, played by the lovely Jennifer Hudson. It has already been said a lot about how her character barely impacts the plot, aside from setting up a spam folder in Carrie's inbox, which conveniently keeps Big's emails out of her sight. Louise never meets any of Carrie's friends, and we don't even get a sense of her life outside of work. And of course, there is an even bigger issue.
I thought I have to bring in somebody new, and then I thought I have to bring in somebody that's never been, because I had 4 jewels. I just needed a new kind, and we were lucky enough to get Jennifer Hudson to play this character, and it was important to me that she be African American because that was it was time.
I'm sorry, am I the only one whose skin crawls when he calls her a new kind of jewel?
Who's Jewel?
The only thing Louise's character is supposed to embody is the film's theme, which is, say it with me, love and labels. All we know about Louise is that she likes expensive handbags, which she can't afford, so she rents them, and that she moved to New York City because she was searching for love. And then she finds love as she reunites with her ex-boyfriend back in St. Louis, and she gets her own Louis Vuitton. Love and labels, love and labels.
The theme of the movie is
20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Enjoy yourself, but be yourself. Don't be anybody else's version of you. You know, don't let a label define you, whether it be your clothing or a title like bride or groom or husband or wife.
Samantha. Samantha has so many great little moments in this movie. Again, I love the scene when she feeds Carrie in Mexico. I also love a throwback of Samantha smoking a cigar. Her speech during the rehearsal dinner is cute.
Hey, dickwad! I'm speaking!
You tell him. But ultimately, Samantha's storyline is pretty miserable. So she's now living in LA with Smith, who has become a big movie star and the face of brands like American Airlines, Vitamin Water, and IWC Schaffhausen watches, which is a Swiss watch company with a history of extremely sexist ads. So, you know, using a guy who was never emasculated by an older and powerful woman is a smart idea for a rebrand. Don't you think? But for Samantha, life with such a famous man is ironically incredibly boring. All Smith seems to do is sleep and work out, so her life completely revolves around his daily schedule. And it seems Samantha's life in LA is really lonely as she didn't make any friends. Most of her free time is spent alone, lusting over this Dante guy, eating guacamole or shopping. Again, love and labels. She doesn't love herself or her life, but she can get... You get the point. What this story tries to show is how Samantha suppresses her sexual desires with food, which, by the way, this plotline was already done in Sex and the City with Miranda, but back then nobody fat-shamed her for it.
Mother of God, what's with the gut? Well, she's eating something out there.
The craziest part is that Kim Cattrall didn't even gain weight for this scene. The costume department simply dressed her in clothes a couple of sizes too small to create the illusion. And while I understand that Samantha was always incredibly body conscious, she was a precursor to clean eating,
Are the vegetables on the veggie plate organic?
constantly getting aesthetic procedures, practicing yoga, etc. Therefore, a storyline about weight gain could have been interesting for her character. But instead of treating it thoroughly, it became an excuse for her closest friends to fat-shame her. I wish this plotline had gone in a different direction, like leading Samantha and pregnant Charlotte to become gym buddies and support each other through their respective challenges. Like, this feels like a no-brainer. Why they chose this instead? Once again, there are no comments from Michael Patrick King about this plotline, but I can tell you that Chris Noth admitted he was asked to lose weight before filming the movie. Quote, "When we were doing the Sex and the City movie, Michael Patrick King came up to me and said, 'Listen, dude, we're not calling you Mr. Big because of the size of your stomach, so go and lose that before we start shooting.'" End quote. A similar message was given to John Corbett while preparing for his return as Aiden in the reboot. Michael Patrick King commented, quote, "We gave John a makeover. We cut his hair, we took the turquoise jewelry away, and we told him he had to be rock hard when he came back." End quote. Justice for Samantha. Samantha deserved better. That said, I do appreciate the resolution of her story. She decides to end her relationship with Smith and his fedora. I hope he didn't take the black pill. Imagine. Their breakup beautifully mirrors her breakup scene with Richard in the Atlantic City episode of the show.
I love you too, Richard. But I love me more. I love you, but I love me more.
But this time there is a notable difference. She keeps the ring. This small yet symbolic gesture shows that this relationship has truly changed her. Samantha will always carry a part of Smith with her, cherishing how their time together shaped her and helped her grow. It's such a poignant and fitting end to this story that always makes me tear. But the scene that always makes me weep the hardest is Miranda and Steve's meeting on the Brooklyn Bridge. This bridge is such a beautiful metaphor which symbolizes their willingness to meet each other halfway, both literally and emotionally. Aww. However, I do find it fascinating how differently we discuss Carrie's and Steve's infidelity. It seems we're far more willing to forgive Steve, and I think it's largely because we don't see it happen on screen. We don't know who the other person was, the circumstances, or whether he wrestled with the decision beforehand. What we do see is the aftermath, how it devastates him and ruins his family. And yeah, I think the absence of context combined with Steve's visible remorse make it easy to sympathize with him compared to Carrie, whose actions were more explicitly shown in the show. What do you think? Carrie's story wraps up with a mix of emotions. First, Charlotte accidentally runs into Big at a restaurant, and this meeting upsets her so much that it sends her into labor. But before that, she quite rightly curses the day he was born. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how Charlotte is the MVP of this movie? She's absolutely hilarious. But if only she could have known what a little menace Rose, soon to be Rock, would grow up to be. Poor Charlotte had no idea what she was in for.
Yo, my name is Rock, the new kid on the block.
But back to Carrie. After hearing about Big from Charlotte and Harry, she finally discovers the emails he has been sending to her to express how sorry he is. But because he's apparently allergic to expressing his own feelings, he spent months copy-pasting quotes from famous love letters. And I'm sorry, but that's not romantic. That's lazy. Use your own words, Big. Also, can we talk about the fact that we're supposed to root for him because he drove a woman in labor to the hospital? It's such a low bar, like, congrats, Big, you did the absolute bare minimum of being a decent human being. Somehow that's enough to redeem him? Really? And then Carrie and Big reunite in the empty closet of their penthouse apartment and decide to get married. And if it feels like I'm rushing the end of this review, trust me, it's not me, it's the movie. Apparently, the original script was a staggering 700 pages long, and you can really feel it in the film's pacing. The first half feels so drawn out, and the second half seems rushed. I mean, where's the coffee shop scene where Carrie tells the ladies that she and Big have decided to get married anyway? I need that moment of girl talk. I need Miranda's reaction. Instead, we jump straight to City Hall. Carrie wears vintage suit she planned for the first wedding, and then she and Big lived happily ever after. Oh wait. Now, when researching this movie, I stumbled across a review that perfectly sums up my thoughts. As Marcin Miller wrote for Bold Life, quote, "Sex and the City isn't a movie per se, it's a cultural phenomenon. As a movie, it's only so-so. As an event, it's terrific." End quote. And I couldn't agree more. It's the perfect movie to watch with your friends. There is something so fun about getting together, drinking Cosmos, laughing at the outrageous fashion, and weeping during those iconic moments like Miranda and Steve's meeting on the Brooklyn Bridge. It's a great bonding experience, but it's also a movie that you can enjoy the best when you're not taking it too seriously. Because when you start looking at the missed opportunities, like some of the characters' dynamics or rushed resolutions, it can feel a little underwhelming. But with the right company, it's still a fun ride. Now, I know some of you might be upset that I haven't discussed the iconic blue Manolos, but guys, don't you worry, I've already dedicated an entire video to Sex and the City and Manolos, so shameless plug it is. As for the review of the second movie, it's probably the most requested video on my channel, and honestly, I am not super excited about tackling it, but if you're interested in more of a what went wrong kind of a deep dive, like whose idea this movie even was, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if it's not already done, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!